Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Crop. I'm Anna Heslop and today we're going to be talking about soil tests and understanding the results. Rocketing fertiliser prices, freshwater issues, greenhouse gas emissions, there's a million reasons why we need to be more and more efficient with our fertiliser application and use. So the best place to start with this is to test your soil and then to understand what those results mean. So this is clearly not my area of expertise. So luckily, with me today, I have Jeff Morton from MortonAg, and it is his area of expertise. So welcome, Jeff.
Hi.
First of all, what soil tests should arable farmers be doing in the autumn?
Just the basic ones really. Soil pH for a start, just to test the acidity of the soil. Olsen P, very important one. Sulphate, sulphur, and then the four cations, the calcium, magnesium, probably three calcium and magnesium and potassium are the important ones. That's on an annual basis. We could perhaps talk about some of the least frequent ones later.
How often? That's annual. And also another question: how deep?
Yes, it is annual, basically. So it's the whole secret is to get trends over time from the same paddocks sampled at the same time. By doing that, you reduce variation. Depth, 150 millimetres is the standard depth, because most crops, cereal crops, roots go down that far to extract nutrients, and secondly, most of the research has been done, the calibrations for the soil tests have been done at that soil depth.
Okay. You've done the tests and you've followed the protocols and you've taken your samples from all across the paddock and mixed it and shaken it and sent it off. What's the most important thing to do when those results come back in?
Well, probably in most cases you'll be involving someone from a fertiliser company or a consultant. So I think the key thing is to try and have a bit of understanding yourself so that you can kind of interpret what they're telling you. So basically it's a case of looking at your history of soil testing. So you look back over the years, look at the samples from the same paddock sample at the same time, and you look how well those soil tests results you've just got fit that trend. And basically, if the trend's pretty constant, then you're maintaining what you got there. And if the trend's going downwards, then you need to put more on. If the trend's going upwards, there's potential for possibly a lower rate and some savings in fertiliser.
Okay, so when the results come back in, you get several pages of very long technical language. There's some terminology in there I thought we might just run through. And you've already mentioned some of them, but pH, everyone talks about pH, but why is it so important and what is the optimum?
pH is important because it affects the availability of trace elements and also some of the other major elements, but it also affects the activity of microorganisms. So if your pH is too low, if the soil's too acidic, the kind of favourable bacteria and fungi don't do the job they should do. Your pH 6.0 to 6.2 is where research has shown the optimal pH for cereal crops is. So that's where you should. That's where it should be.
Okay, so there's another term on those results, CEC, a cation exchange capacity. So I can translate the abbreviation into the term, but I still got no idea what it means.
Well, basically, it's the ability of the soil to actually hang on to the cations, which, as I said before, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. So basically, for most of the cropping soils, even in New Zealand, that's in the medium range, which is fine for retaining those nutrients.
So there'll be a scale of low, medium, high there, and you'd want to be in the medium.
Well, it's dictated to by your soil type, really. There's not a lot you can do about it, so your soil type tells you where you are.
Okay. So that's one that you just have to manage rather than there's not a lot that you can alter?
No, not really. The only thing is if your organic matter is one way that the soil does hang on to these cations. So obviously you want to optimise your soil organic matter levels.
Okay, so that's a good thing to do. Base saturation, what is it and why should I worry about that? And, what's the ideal there?
Well, it's a percentage of each of those three cations on the exchange sites in the soil, which are provided by clay minerals and soil organic matter. So basically the ratio means one thing, but basically the more key measurement is the actual quick test levels of those nutrients, because you might have a favourable ratio, so-called, but then you might still not have enough of each of those nutrients. So it's best to look at the quantity rather than the relationship of one to the other. Okay,
so you could have a generally low, the proportions or ratios might be right, but you might still be generally low.
Yes.
Anion storage, what's that all about?
Well, anions are negatively charged ions, whereas the cations are positively charged ions, but it's all about phosphorus and sulphur and how well the soil retains those two nutrients. And again, most of the sedimentary soils on which cereal cropping is carried out are in the kind of low to medium. So that means that for phosphorus, if it's low to medium, to increase your soil S&P level, you need less phosphorus, capital phosphorus applied compared if you had a high anion storage capacity. And it's also important for sulphate. And these soils don't hang on to sulphate all that well. So that's why the levels are probably mainly in the kind of 6 to 12 parts per million level for sulphate sulphur.
And that's what we'd be aiming for?
Yes,
yeah,
sure.
Okay, so another one that we hear a lot about, anaerobically mineralisable N. Can I kind of guarantee that that's going to play the game?
Well, yeah, within certain limits. Basically, it tells you how much of the organic nitrogen in the soil will become available to the crop in the life of that crop, but that's dependent on temperature and moisture. So if you get a colder spring, basically you'll get less nitrogen released, and you won't get as much nitrogen supplied from that source as if you had a warmer spring, and vice versa for soil moisture. If you've got a moisture pinch during that spring, you may not get as much of that nitrogen released.
So it's there, it's in the bank, but you may not always get it out.
No, it's probably got a error, variability of plus or minus 20 or 30%. So around it. So, like all measurements, it needs to be put into context with the variability around the measurement.
You were working out, say, your N application rate for a crop. Mm-hmm. Is it wise to take that anaerobically available N into that whole equation, or is that just extra buffer?
No, it's very important to take it into that equation, because that tells you how much nitrogen the soil's supplying. And obviously the demand for nitrogen depends on your crop yield. So the difference theoretically is how much fertiliser nitrogen you need to apply.
Okay, so it is important.
Yes, it is important, okay. Yeah.
And some of the tests will have low, medium and high ranges. Are we aiming for a medium, a happy medium, or a different elements requiring different high, low, mediums?
Basically, it's a range. For S&P, it's 20 to 30. For quick test potassium, it's kind of 6 to 9. Sulphate, as we said before, 6 to 12. So the better ranges actually than on the lab sheets are found in the Managing Soil Fertility on Cropping Farms booklet, which is available from the Fertiliser Association and is online on their website. Yeah. Okay.
So there's plenty of information out there.
Yes, there is, yeah.
We'll put a link to that booklet. You'll be able to find it at the end of the podcast here for you who are listening. Okay, so we know our results now. We've understood them. We know what all the technical terms mean. How do I go about deciding how much to actually apply? And you've already mentioned that I've probably got either a rep from my grain or seed company or from the fertiliser company or another consultant. Do I just do what they say?
It's good to actually have some understanding and ask some questions so that you're getting the most cost-effective fertiliser. So those soil testing trends are very important because they are actually on-farm results. Whereas if you can probably use other kind of modelled figures, but they're based on trials that may or may not apply to your farm. So for maintenance, those trends are essential. But first of all, before you maintain your levels, you've got to make sure they're in the right range.
So you look at your result, see if it needs to come up a bit, and then put your crop on top of that.
Yes. So basically, for a crop, when we talk about maintenance, that's basically what's lost with crop removal mainly over that season. So maintenance is basically replacing the losses to keep your soil test level where they should be. Yeah.
And obviously they'll fluctuate throughout the rotation anyway.
That'll probably average itself out over time, and probably the variation there is no more than the kind of variation around the tests anyway. So you've just got to be a little bit careful how you interpret them. Yeah.
Okay, so what other options are there for maximising fertiliser efficiency?
Well, I've come up with 5 things here that you should be looking at. The first one is kind of learn, or probably a lot of you guys do it anyway, but know how to work out dollars per kilogram of nutrients. So you make sure in the fertiliser you're using, you're getting the most cost-effective application of each nutrient. That's pretty important. The other thing is try and reduce other potential limiting factors, because fertiliser is obviously one of the big costs now. It probably always was, but maybe even more so now. So just make sure that you've got good soil structure in your paddock, so that's not limiting response to P. Make sure if you're irrigating, you're putting on the right amount of water, not too much or not too little. So just make sure that you're doing everything else within your powers as well as you can to optimise the return from fertiliser. All paddock testing is probably worth doing, and probably a lot of people do that now, but that gives you some idea of what's going on in each paddock, and that means that you can treat each paddock differently to get them into either reduce the fertiliser or increase it to get them into the range they should be. Minimise losses. I mean, the 2 major losses are obviously nitrate leaching and also volatilisation, which is a loss of urea. So you've got a loss of ammonia. So you've got your urease inhibitors that both fertiliser companies have got to minimise that. So that's quite important. And be aware of the technologies, the yield mapping, etc., how that can work in to give you more efficient application of fertiliser, and lime, obviously, of course. Yeah.
So when you're talking about whole farm testing or all paddock testing, how often are we doing that?
Well, basically, obviously the first time, and then you do you might do some corrections to some paddocks. Like some of them might be in where you want them to be, so that's fine. Just continue what you're doing with them. But the other ones you maybe cut back on or put more on. You could do another test just to check after probably a couple of years, because it takes a while to react, just to check that it's done the job you wanted to do. Yeah, it's just a case of being aware of what's going on and just doing what you can to get the best return for your dollar.
Okay, thanks very much, Jeff.
No problem.
There'll be several resources we can check out, links underneath this podcast. Thanks everybody for listening, and have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.